Hey, good morning, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Rebel News Daily live stream. I'm your host today, Sheila Gunn-Reid, and I'm also joined by my co-host based in Calgary, Adam Sos. Adam, how's it going?
It is going wonderful. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. It was kind of an exciting weekend in the freedom world. A lot of things happening in Ottawa as the bikers' Rolling Thunder convoy protest demonstration unfolded. We had a Rebel team of sort of 3 units of roving reporters on the scene to bring you the other side of the story, because as you know, the mainstream media, even if they were there, they wouldn't report it accurately anyway. But before we get to that, we'll get sort of the nuts and bolts of everything out of the way, because there's a lot to talk about. And I feel like Adam and I are going to have a lot to say about this. So as you know, this is the Rebel News Daily live stream. We are currently streaming on YouTube. However, there will come a time that perhaps maybe we may have to cut the YouTube feed. So if you're watching us over on YouTube, please be aware of that fact, because YouTube is a censorship platform, not a free speech platform. And there are certain things that we can't talk about there. And one of those is election integrity. And the other big one is questioning the advice of a public health officer. So I think we all know what that means. So if you have to cut the feed, the good news is you can join us on one of the other platforms that we are also simultaneously streaming on. So that's Getter. But if you want to interact with us, might I suggest you join us on Rumble, Odyssey, or Super U. And not only can you interact with us on those platforms, you can interact with each other, and you can support the work that we do. So on Rumble, you can leave us a Rumble rant. That's their paid chat. And if you send us one of those, we'll read it on air. On Odyssey, it's called a hyper chat. There's a couple different ways to do that. One is using their library cryptocurrency, and one of those is using regular old-fashioned money. And lastly is Super U, and you can leave us a Super U shout. That's their form of paid chat, and it allows you to support the work that we do completely willingly, and have your say. And if you've got a story idea, a comment, a question, put it in one of those paid chats, and we'll do our best to address it on air. I think I got everything there. I think so.
That sounded right. That sounded familiar.
Sorry if my Skype feed is breaking up a little bit. I suppose you get what you pay for. And I'm using a free account. But secondarily, you know, it's Bill Gates software. So, but anyways, we alluded to the fact that we would talk about the convoy bikers protest, the Rolling Thunder protest. And if you had paid attention to the mainstream media, if you had gotten all your news from the mainstream media and you were watching the press conferences of the evil authoritarian Steve Bell, the interim police chief in Ottawa, or Jim Watson, or for that matter, the Liberals, you would think that this, all the Hells Angels, not only in North America, but across the world, were rolling into Ottawa. And because of this, they needed to basically mobilize the entire Ottawa Police Service, plus 800 additional RCMP officers. And that doesn't even take into account the likely several hundred other police from OPP and other municipalities all across Ontario. They wanted to get in there and, I don't know, as the RCMP musical ride says, put their jackboots on the ground so that the protesters can hear it. And what we saw was just a mass arrest, huge police force, huge police presence against, again, look, largely peaceful protesters, overwhelmingly peaceful. Look at this. It's like a street festival, and they have to treat it like an active shooter event, apparently.
Yeah. You juxtapose this with there was protests in Montreal, there was property being vandalized, destroyed.
May Day, right.
Yeah, they were progressive. So that's completely allowed, and that's fine. And that doesn't warrant any sort of action. The other sort of wild thing here is everyone kind of concurs that the Emergencies Act was entirely unwarranted. So they're like, okay, no Emergencies Act, but we're still going to practically implement martial law, lock down the streets, violate your rights in every way, shape, or form. Justin Trudeau is so audacious that he doesn't even think he needs to bring forward this Emergencies Act in order to do these things. And the fact that these police chiefs and these officers continue to go along with it. Listen, here's some pretty sage advice. If you have a case of the sniffles as a police officer, it would be absolutely irresponsible of you to go into work. These officers are choosing to do this. There's no, well, I was just doing my job. When you're going down and harassing and bullying these peaceful protesters. Like, look at that. It's ridiculous. And with all the rhetoric we've heard around de-escalation and training, all that these cops have been doing, whether it's in Calgary, whether it's in Ottawa, is escalating. And then when we do see actual crimes being committed by, say, people throwing eggs at the protesters or shoving the protesters or any of these other things, or vandalism at churches, we're going to talk about all this, the cops say, I don't know. I'm not really here for that. I'm here to oppress freedom of speech, oppress the right to protest, all of that. It's absolutely jarring to see that this is what policing has become in Canada. And for folks out there who are like, oh, well, those people, you protesters, you extremists, you think you don't have freedom. Hey, sorry to break it to you, privileged Canadians who maybe haven't lived through this, but the people who are most concerned about this, the people who are sounding the cautionary bell, are the people who have been in countries where the communists took over and everything went to hell. And they've seen this firsthand, and they're now bringing their experience to Canada. They came here for freedom, and they're saying, hey, this is what we saw before everything went really bad. We should be standing up against this. And you're calling them kooks, and you're calling them conspiracy theorists. Well, they're pretty darn accurate, and they also have lived experience that they're drawing from, saying this is not good. And if you don't see what these police are doing as concerning and reminiscent of some banana republic police state, you're just not paying attention.
Yeah. I mean, in all this, for a few hundred bikers, and I would say a few thousand, maybe up to 8,000 or 9,000 of their supporters taking to the streets.
Yeah.
But do you think you would have seen this sort of police presence during Black Lives Matter, when we know that Black Lives Matter is a violent movement? Entire neighborhoods were burned, riots, people died during Black Lives Matter protests, demonstrations, riots, call it whatever you want. But that didn't happen in the original convoy to Ottawa. It hasn't happened in any of the Freedom March protests that happened in cities and towns all across the country and have been occurring for 2 years. This has been a largely peaceful protest. The violence seems to be against them and often at the hands of the police. But the show of force for the police, it looks as though they were trying to instigate violence. And kudos to the protesters for keeping their cool, for not giving the police, the city of Ottawa, the Liberals, and the mainstream media the violence that they've been saber rattling for. Look at this. One lady, she's smaller than me, and I'm not a big woman. She's like a little tiny waif. The woman is two-dimensional, and look how many cops are dealing with her. And I think they shoved her at one point from behind.
Well, yeah, we've seen all this content, like people being, the one lady, I don't know if it was her or someone else, one lady shoved from behind. She turns around assuming some jerk shoved her, which, she was right, and goes, hey, what are you doing? Is like a get away from me sort of mechanism. And they're going, wanted woman, major criminal. This is the serious offense. There's this other tweet too. Ottawa police Twitter is the most ridiculous, farcical thing I've ever seen. Like, they literally were saying like vehicles were occupying a parking lot, like as though it's like a movement.
That was their major crime. I noticed that too. They're like, vehicles attempted to occupy a space of parking lot at such and such an address, major towing operation in action. I'm like, people tried to park in a parking lot. And again, you're treating this like an active shooter event. Alexa, who was on the scene, she reported back to us sort of on Saturday morning after seeing what was unfolding on Friday night, that they were, even though they had closed the streets, they were sort of allowing the convoy trucks that came in support of the bikers and people in their personal vehicles into certain parts of the city, and then closing the road behind them and then towing them. So they were kettling them, catching them, and then towing them away, as opposed to just letting them move through. They were creating infractions, creating crimes so that they could tow people's vehicles.
There seems to be a pattern of that. I think there was an incident in the United States. People were somehow let into a supposedly secured building, and afterwards there was a bunch of enforcement. I can't remember what it was. I might be remembering things wrong. The wild thing with this is just how, like, there's no exceptions. Like, you even look at Devlin Gannon, who was arrested here in Calgary at that protest. Literally, like, a cop tripped over some 12-year-old kid not related to him at all, and they're saying, look, aggravated assault. Like, the cops are just wrong over and over and over again. They're saying there's guns, there's no guns. They're saying we never pointed guns at people. They're pointing guns at people. They're shooting tear gas canisters at our reporters. Like, it's absolutely wild. And it's
look at this. This is crazy. They've surrounded a bumper pull, or sorry, a fifth wheel on a semi. Look at all these cops. Are there no other crimes in Ontario right now? Put these cops on the border.
And look at the people standing around. They're literally like texting and looking the other way. Like, they're filming or like chatting. Like, this isn't like one of those Antifa events where they're getting in the cops' faces and there's a lineup, so they're calling for reinforcements. Like, this is utter ineptitude. And like, not only on an infringing on our fundamental rights sort of way and a police state sort of way, but literally just the ineptitude for this moronic police chief to be spending this kind of money on nothing burger. Like, it's literally peaceful demonstrations. I saw these shots. It was like, it's the same thing when we were down reporting in Milk River, Coots. Everyone is just friendly. People say that they feel safe with their kids being there. There's bouncy houses and people are cooking for each other. Everything is like so peaceful. And then you have the military and these SWAT teams lined up. Like, for example, when we were down at Milk River, when they went through issuing those tickets, they had like a SWAT team marching through the streets. They could have gone around handing out tickets.
Yeah.
But that's not what they did. They have these massive SWAT presences. They have these massive... It's the same thing with Pastor Artur Pawlowski across this. They always have like a SWAT team show up and some trucker or a family is like, can I help you?
Yeah. I mean, compare this police operation here to the treatment of the Canadian border. We can't send 800 RCMP officers to secure the Canadian border. We've got two cops down there saying, turn around, don't come in. Okay, get in here, you big lugs. Give me your luggage. That's the experience if you illegally cross into Canada. We can't even, for some reason, put up a temporary fence down there, but we can fortify the Ottawa downtown with 1,000 extra cops because peaceful protesters are coming to their nation's capital to protest the federal government. Where the hell else are you supposed to protest the federal government except where the federal government is seated? And if the mayor of Ottawa and the police chief of Ottawa don't like the idea that this stuff is happening in their city, I'm sorry, but this is what you get when this is the nation's capital. Maybe we should move the nation's capital somewhere else. Send it to Red Deer. They'd be fine with this there.
Red Deer. Red Deer. I like that. That has a good ring to it. You know, it's how far we've fallen as a country, and how many people have been saying that this is the trajectory we're heading on. It's really, really jarring. Like, this is the stuff of nightmares. This is the stuff of novels, and it's happening in real life right before us. And I want to take a look at some of this absolutely ridiculous content. Some of it's serious, some of it kind of ridiculous, but some of the sort of counter protesting that we're seeing that is driven by this malice that's been created by Justin Trudeau, that's been created by this mayor, by this police chief, people throwing eggs out their windows at protesters.
Let's do that one.
Yeah, let's go to that. And this is shocking. While we pull that up, this is assault. There's police watching this assault. They're doing nothing, and they're going around and harassing families.
They've been threatening that they were going to do this, I think, at least since Thursday. They were sort of organizing this unwelcoming party, and they were threatening to throw eggs at the bikers and the supporters. You throw an egg at a moving vehicle, especially a motorcycle, you could seriously injure somebody. You could cause them to lose control of the bike, and then what happens? They wipe out a few more bikes, maybe they die. No big deal, because nobody did a damn thing to stop any of this. They're whipping eggs at people and these people, I would say, have been radicalized by the rhetoric of the Ottawa police, the rhetoric of the Liberals, who are saying that, the Ottawa citizens were terrorized and that these people were violent, and they were saying that they found guns in the convoy in Ottawa. All of that was wrong. All of it was absolutely wrong. But when you barf that misinformation, which is what it is, into the media, and then the media repeats it uncritically because they aren't actually there on the scene, you radicalize people to commit acts of assault. And with all those cops standing around, you think anybody was arrested for throwing an egg? I highly doubt it.
Well, and this is the thing. These cops have clearly been instructed not to enforce the law. They've been instructed to limit freedom of protest. That is self-evident. Yeah. We see assaults, and it's amazing to see just how direct this malice is towards generally non-criminal, peaceful protesters. If you're, say, a member of an Indigenous community who commits an axe attack on a work site, no Emergencies Act. We're not really going to investigate follow-up. If you're an immigrant coming into the country, I won't say like an illegal immigrant sneaking into the country, God bless immigrants who come the right way. But if you're breaking the law, sneaking into the country, you get all the love in the world. If you're Antifa, you're looting and burning, the cops aren't going to stop you. You want to steal from stores, that's absolutely fine as well. If you're egging people in Ottawa, if you're egging peaceful protesters, which is also an actual crime, we're not going to enforce that either. But if you honk a little bit too loud, well, then we're going to freeze your bank accounts.
That's what is it? Audio assault. I saw somebody called the honking that it was like literally physically assaulting their ears. Post-traumatic honking. Anyways, we've got a clip of the eggs being thrown from Marie Oakes.
Shellage on the ground, it looks like.
There she is.
Yeah, you can see right there.
Yeah, there's some more too. And you know, the wild thing while we watch this is like, if these protesters were to go and intervene or enact any sort of self-defense mechanism against the people chucking eggs at them, or if they were to go to the police, which we've seen repeatedly, go to the police saying that person assaulted me, they threw 3 eggs at me, I want to press charges, the cops wouldn't do it. But if they went over and personally talked to them, the cops would get in their face and shove them, and media would film saying confrontational protesters.
Sorry, are they egging from up
there?
Looking.
Yeah.
Are they throwing stuff from up there?
Yeah, some jerk off was throwing eggs apparently.
They're egging? All right, well, we know where they are. They're above the Afghani Kabul Express.
So they know exactly where it happened. They're throwing eggs, and the police haven't done anything. And they know. No. They know they're going to get away with it. And you know what? Good on the protesters for not retaliating. Because the second you retaliate, you're the guy getting hauled away in handcuffs. Yeah. I don't know if I have it in me. If somebody hits me with an egg and I know who they are, it's going to be tough for me not to, sometimes I get a little Old Testament.
Not to white knight here, but if you hit me with an egg, I might shrug it off. If you hit a woman I'm with or a child, I'm going to be paying you a visit. Like it's ridiculous. Yeah. And there's cops watching this. Like these cops, there's 800 cops watching this, doing absolutely
800
nothing.
Extra RCMP, just RCMP.
Yeah, just watching. You know, the wild thing too is, well, I know when we're done, not to just keep harping on Milk River, but the amount of cops that they have to bring in because local cops will not do this, or they won't be, the police know that local cops won't be trusted in their own neighborhoods again. So they bring in external cops. Yeah. When I was talking to some of the cops down in Milk River, I was asking them what the tickets were for, and they didn't know the rules because it's a different jurisdiction. So they literally had like peace officers issuing tickets because they know the rules, and the cops didn't know the laws at all. This is where you have cop saying, well, that's illegal, that's not illegal, we don't know what is, what isn't, we don't have jurisdiction here. But when it comes to trampling people and beating people up, the jurisdiction becomes pretty sweeping. I do want to talk a little bit about some of the other non-enforcement we saw, particularly with what we saw at churches. But first, I want to look at the footage of your Trigly-Wicken, and then
the Trigly-Wicken.
Yeah, and then the pig footage from Efron, the squealing pigs. I don't know, which one do you want to jump to first?
Okay, let's do the squealy dog toys. This is the level of
pigs,
discourse.
Though, aren't they?
Yeah, they're little squeaky pigs.
Yeah.
So this is the level of discourse. If you ask these people why they're there, this is what you're going to get. And I want to simply point out, and I'm not saying they're being racist, but I am saying if conservatives did this to a journalist of color, then they would be accused of racism. Up and down, they'd be canceled. They'd never be able to work. They'd never, like, you would have CBC knocking on your door saying, why are you being racist towards this journalist of color? And the reason I'm saying this is not that it matters to us, but Efron, who is our head of video and a great journalist, the pride of Hamilton, he also sits on our board of directors. And he was out there interviewing these people. Efron is a visible minority, a man of color, as they say, or a person of color. You can't say man of color, a POC, as they say. And these
a bipedal of color.
Yeah, and these white liberal do-gooders are honking dog toys in his face. Now, if you were a conservative or a pro-freedom protester doing that to a CBC journalist of color, they would be saying, look at these conservatives insinuating that this person of color is a dog. But because it's Efron and Efron works for Rebel News, he may as well be just a white supremacist, apparently. Yeah. And I think it was a Toronto Star journalist saying, ha, 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 ha. This is sort of what they deserve.
In one of the more creative things I've seen.
It's literally the dumbest thing I saw that day, and I got up pretty early until Trigly-Wicken came along. They would, like, the people responding saying this is how they deserve to get treated. Those are the ones that every time somebody sends a mean tweet to Rosie Barton or says fake news to a CBC journalist as they walk by, they want to report that as a hate crime. But it's okay to treat our beloved Efron this way. This will not stand.
Yeah, no, it's ridiculous. I titled this performance piece Progressive Discourse 2022. It's something to see. If we've got the clip ready, let's just roll it, because
what exactly does the pigs represent there?
I love that.
Do you feel like it's still justified to prevent unvaccinated people from flying on federal flights right now?
They're committed. I'll give them that. They're committed to their...
Around the world, there's no other government preventing unvaccinated people from flying. It's only Canada that's preventing the unvaccinated from flying in the country. No other country is doing that. Do you promote that?
It's so
policy?
And he's asking good questions. How is he doing this?
Yeah.
You know, you can tell their politics by their masks right away.
Yeah.
Like, you know what you're dealing with. You don't even have to read their signs. But he's literally asking legitimate questions, and instead they're treating him like garbage. And this is something we deal with every day as Rebel journalists. We laugh at it. Because the people who do it to us are worthy of our mockery. But if this happened to a CBC journalist, holy moly, intolerable Twitter experience for 18 hours.
And it's just how stoic Efron. That's what I was laughing at there. It's stoic Efron. Like, it's the most ridiculous thing. Here's another angle of this. Like, he's being so
visible
calm,
minority.
giving them an opportunity. We see this so often. We'll go, like, Antifa will be at an event and they're arguing with people. So we're like, hey, what's your thing here? What are you arguing? What are you counter protesting? And they attack you. Or we go to a event that's maybe a little more progressive in nature, and then we'll talk to people and say, so what exactly is your point here? What do you... And the amount of time people just go on personal sort of ad hominem attacks is wild. But this is pretty much par for the course in this day and age. That's what you get: screaming, swearing, allegations that you're racist, even if you're a minority. There's no discourse left. And I, for one, there's no one really that I won't talk to and have a conversation with.
No.
Particularly, I mean, unless they're literally spouting hate speech or inciting crimes. But I'll have conversations with people, even if I fundamentally am opposed to them, because, hey, that's part of the job. You ask questions, you investigate, you share perspectives, you tell the other side of the story. That's what journalism once was. I was having a conversation with someone recently, and they said, well, what are you going to do if the Conservatives get back in federally, as though we're not journalists and we just have a one-sided drive? I'm like, no one has held Jason Kenney to account in Alberta more than us, the same way we hold the NDP to account. Whether it's the Federals or the Conservatives in federally, we're going to do journalism. Unlike the CBC and the bought-off and paid-for media that have one agenda and that's all they do, and then they just go to puff pieces when their guys are in and they skirt away from the actual issues. We're journalists, so we ask real questions, like Efron was trying to do there.
Yeah, I mean, and some of the most ridiculous criticism leveled at Efron, like somebody said, well, that's what he should get because he looks like he's dressed like he's going duck hunting. He's a one-man show out on the streets of Ottawa. I look at him and I'm like, okay, perfect. He's got a hat, perfect, check. Comfortable clothes, check, because you're working alone. He's carrying his equipment. Sorry, but our journalists are not well-kept CBC journalists that go out to do 30 seconds worth of work, and they've got a satellite truck, a chase producer, a guy who holds a piece of tinfoil to make sure that you have good lighting, a cameraman, an audio guy, and then somebody else, because I don't know, I think the union makes you have like an 8-man crew. I'm not sure how all of that works. But like literally there's a guy whose job it is to just reflect the sun at your face. Sorry, we run a tight ship. Our journalists work really hard. And that's your criticism? He deserves a dog toys honked in his face because he's not wearing a suit and tie like David Menzies? Give me a break.
Yeah. Well, these mainstream media outlets, if they show up at all, which for folks out there who haven't been following the Conservative Party leadership, leadershipreports.ca, we're very often, other than the biggest events, the only people there covering it. But we also go to these events, and if it's an 8-hour event, we're there for 8 hours. We see the mainstream media show up for 3 minutes and get their one clip and leave, or they get the one clip that they want to make someone look bad. I literally saw at a Dr. Leslyn Lewis event, CTV show up halfway through, sit there not filming. Someone asked a tough question about COVID. They filmed that to try and get her on something, and they left immediately. They got their one clip and they went. We're there all day. Sometimes we go from one story to another. I've had 18-hour days. You can't wear a suit during that. You've got gear in your pockets, battery packs, all that stuff. It's real journalism. Sorry to break it to you guys, but I think Efron looked great there, though. Very stylish. He could be on the cover
of
Andy Bauer magazine, no problem whatsoever.
I love that jacket.
Look at that. Backwards hat. Nice.
Great.
Efron looks good, buddy. Is Efron watching? You're looking good, man.
Styling.
Great work out there.
I want to know where you got.
And let's go to someone who's not looking quite so good now.
Oh, Trigley Wicken. Okay, so everybody remembers Trigley Puff, the triggered lady? I don't know. Lady, maybe.
So. Let's not assume.
Well,
the bipedal. I'm just going to call them bipedal.
Triggered person who freaked out and was screaming, and she went down in history as Trigley Puff. She did look like Trigley. Well, we met the Trigley Wicken over the weekend, or David Menzies did. And I did explicitly tell everybody, please don't wander in too closely into groups of counter-protesters, because they are violent, and they are emboldened, and they are radicalized, and the police are not going to help you. Actually, the police are likely to hurt you, as we learned with Alexa at the last convoy protest. But David saw somebody who looked peaceful and sort of set aside away from everybody else. And so he went up to get her there. I don't know. I'm struggling. Viewpoint on the Rolling Thunder protest. So let's meet the Trigley Wicken.
If you're going to protest something as nebulous as freedom, then you can't encroach on others.
I'm not sure I understand. Is nebulous as freedom?
The concept of a nebulous freedom. They don't have a specific title, a specific reason for being here. They're all over the place, and all they're doing is suppressing Ottawa residents, Ottawa businesses. We are being harassed and held hostage for their supposed encroachments on freedom. What does a single fucking white man have to say to anybody about a bodily autonomy freedoms?
Abraham.
I'm not sure what race has to do with it.
I didn't say anything about race.
You said a white man.
Single white man, sure, race.
Okay, so I mean, what does race have to do with it? When I look at people that are gathering here today, it's right across the multi-diverse spectrum.
No more comments.
Oh, okay then. Well, wait, when it says convoy go home, didn't the convoy go home in February?
They called it a convoy. It's a convoy.
You mean this gathering here, is that a convoy?
Please go away.
Okay then.
No more comments.
All right. But
No more comments.
it just seems to
No
me...
more comments.
Okay.
No more comments.
You can't articulate...
No more comments.
Wow.
No more comments.
Have I triggered you?
No more comments. No more comments. No more comments. No more comments.
It's like interviewing a
No
Coke
more
machine when
comments.
your soda doesn't come
No
out.
more comments.
She just...
No more comments.
It's,
No more comments.
it's like a...
No more
a
comments.
fembot.
No
That's
more
malfunction.
comments.
And you think
No
that
more comments.
somebody is going
No
to
more
go on a
comments.
corner...
Walk away. No more comments. Back away. No more comments.
She's
No
approaching
more
him.
Comments.
Why do I have to
No
walk away?
more comments. No more comments. No more comments. No more comments. No more comments.
I mean, I don't want to jeer at someone who might be going through something, but she's actively
David Menzies is the one going through something there.
he turns away and just tries to say something and sort of leave, and she approaches him and encroaches on him and is screaming no more comments, which is like a comment in and of itself. I don't understand the sort of thought process going on there, but it's pretty coherent and cohesive with what we've seen out of Ottawa police, counter protesters, broadly speaking. But it reveals on a very sort of fundamental level the underlying agenda behind this, and that's hating white males, buying into this progressive agenda. What does that have to do with anything whatsoever? But that's immediately what she goes back to is, well, there are some white males amidst these protesters. Most of these protesters are pretty clear. They're calling for an end to mandates. Now, they may want varying degrees of end to mandates, but generally they're pretty cohesive in their messaging as to what they're asking for. So yeah, I don't know what she came out with a sign. She's engaging in the public square. She's promoting these conversations, and then the second someone's like, well, what do you mean, why are you talking, Dave, why are you talking about white, what does race have to do with it? We see that triggering.
When I first saw this, I thought, this reminds me of the time where my little robot vacuum ate a ball of yarn and slowly ate it, and then it just sort of went like this for a while. It sort of malfunctioned and it was all bunged up and crazy, and then we had to euthanize it. This is what sort of reminds me of that robot malfunctioning versus this person. And it happened the second David Menzies pointed out to her that she had no idea who was in that protest. Yeah. That she had never for a second stopped to consider that it wasn't a bunch of old, white, privileged men, that it's a bunch of blue-collar people, largely, from every single demographic. The second he suggested that, he said, why are you making this about race? I've been over there, and it's people from everywhere. Then she realizes, oh, dang. It's like this. She just got smacked in the face with reality, and she couldn't cope right after that. Now, she's never going to change her mind. She's never going to believe her lying eyes. She will walk over there and see women, men, people from every socioeconomic background, but it's not going to change her mind because she's unable to change her mind. Well, go ahead.
It is. You're dead on. So you just pointed out something so right there. It is this communist style brainwashing. Very often, if you deal with people from Eastern Europe, they may have things that were ingrained into them in their childhood and their education, like we're seeing with the government federally right now. And they can actually confront those realities and realize they're wrong. But then there's like a reset because they've literally been brainwashed. It takes a great deal of active effort to shake those communist tendencies, those predispositions. It takes active work to get rid of that. And that's that moment. You can see it whether it's pro-life apologetics or economics debates or whatever. You see these things where someone asks questions to people, and you can see literally the point. There was a pro-life video with Ben Shapiro very recently where it was Abby Johnson, I think. But you can literally see the person realizing they're wrong right in the question period, and they literally just no more comment. You're dead on with that. It's exactly that moment.
It's the moment where they make the realization, and a normal person will say, maybe I should. For example, I was reading the New York Times expose on Tucker Carlson, which actually just made me like him more. And where he rethought his position on the first Iraq War and neoconservatism. And they pointed it out as like, oh, look at him. He was a hypocrite about war then, but look at him. He's anti-war now. But he points to the reason why he changed his mind and why he came about that way. Normal people are open to changing their mind when other information and viewpoints present themselves to you. These people are not. These people are like those people in a cult who, when the cult leader predicts the doomsday comet is going to come and pick you up and take you away, and it never does, the normal people, or at least the pseudo-normal people who are there, leave the cult. But people like this that we just saw there, Trigley Wiccan, they stay behind, and eventually they drink the Kool-Aid wearing a matching tracksuit and Nikes that they don't make anymore because a cult wore them to die in. That's how you end up so radicalized that you're doing stupid stuff like that. It's because you are not willing when new information presents itself to change their mind, and it's very dangerous. And the left preys on these people.
And it's sad how with the massively funded state media, the prime minister, how far sensible people have gone down this path. I'm actually going to be speaking now about COVID-19 and health measures, but I'm going to be speaking in favor of the medical health professionals. So I think we're okay on the mainstream front. I actually have colleagues and friends who, while the health officials have changed their position over time, and they're now saying, oh, well, that information we had on vaccine efficacy or whatever it is, it's actually now this is the information, and this is what the mainstream sort of health officers, whatever it may be, chief medical health officers, varies province to province. So I have friends who are no longer in line with the health officials who have come over a little bit more towards probably where you and I might stand on some of these issues. But the point I'm making here is we were debating this stuff, and I'm saying this isn't even what you're not saying what Dina Hinshaw says. You're not agreeing with the mainstream health narrative. And then these people who are calling me anti-science said, I don't care what you show me. I don't care any documentation or government papers that you show me. I'm not changing my mind on this. Yeah. So if healthcare officials are saying, oh, they made an assumption earlier, they actually have more accurate information now, this is accurate, and all the science seems to suggest that the new position is accurate, and you're not willing to embrace that, you have bought into the cult entirely, more than public health officials. Yeah.
Well, and there's an extra layer of just the cult-like behavior in all of this, and that it is these people, like what you're seeing here, outside of very few independent outlets in Canada. There are more in the United States, which is great for the United States because they have the First Amendment that protects these sorts of things. But in Canada, there are very few places where you can get information that is not government subsidized or filtered through the government. And so that thing that cults do, where they isolate you and cut you off from like your baseline of normal, that's happening on a grand scale for some of these people because they're not getting access to the other information because it's all filtered through the government. So you're only getting the information the government wants you to have unless you actively go seeking it out. But when you're in the throes of brainwashing, like this poor woman, she'll never get there. So that thing that cults do where they control the information you get, that's happening to an entire population at this point, and it's only going to get worse with Justin Trudeau's censorship. So we're going to have a lot of people radicalized like this poor woman here who I am making fun of her a little bit, but I also have a lot of empathy because I think she has probably tendencies to this sort of behavior, but she has been radicalized and it's been made a lot worse by the people who claim that they're tolerating, they're tolerant people and they're compassionate people. They did this to her, and she does not look like a happy individual.
No, it's absolutely just to see the lack of discourse. Like, discourse, dialogue matters so much, and we're seeing an active effort by this government. It's not only cults, but it's also totalitarian governments that seek to destroy any divergent opinion. Big Brother will take care of you. You don't need alternative opinions. You can say something that is so evidently factual, or like pointing at a crowd and saying, well, that's not a bunch of old white men, that's an extremely diverse group of people, or point at a statistic from accredited organization and say, well, what do you make of this statistic? And it glazes over. It is like that communist brainwashing where they're like, no, that doesn't jive with me. To the point of the cult thing, I think lots of people, whether it be virtue signaling or medical things, which we'll skirt away from, they think that they've replaced religion with this. It's their new religion. And so whether they participated in an immunization program or they tweeted the right thing, that in their mind is their contribution to society, because most of these people, frankly, probably don't do a lot of volunteer work or charitable work. Statistically speaking, we know that progressives do less than, in the United States anyways, there's research, but this is sort of their identity. They formed it around this. And when you're forming your identity around Justin Trudeau's politics instead of, I don't know, a couple thousand-year-old tradition that's held the test of time, you're going to encounter some problems. But never fear. I do want to talk about some of the vandalism that we saw, but I do want to get into this really quickly. Never fear. These cult members of the Justin Trudeau cult, they didn't have to worry, because clearly Justin Trudeau was in Ottawa and he was taking the Rolling Thunder convoy on headfirst, addressing these issues, unifying us, and setting the story straight, sunny ways all the way. I didn't pay attention on the weekend. I'm assuming that's what happened, right, Sheila?
Yeah, no. He did exactly what he did the last time when there's a convoy of anti-Trudeau protesters rolling in. Justin Trudeau was like, nothing going on in the capital this weekend. I'm going to head to the lake. Well, same old thing. I said he pulled the third world dictator move. When things get a little hectic in the capital, when the peasants start to rise up, what does your third world dictator do? Oh, he jets off somewhere else. And so Justin Trudeau, same thing, rolling thunder, headed for the capital. Where does Justin Trudeau go? I don't know, but he took off. He was not there. He left for the weekend. He took a personal day because absolutely nothing to deal with in the capital. This guy, what a piece of work.
It's something else. It is absolutely something else. Last time he suddenly came down with COVID symptoms, which people didn't necessarily believe, but maybe, sure. This time he's like, I'm not going to bother declaring an emergencies act. I'm not even going to pretend I have COVID. We're going to send the cops in like they're my personal military and security detail, and I'm going to go jet off somewhere and do whatever the heck I feel like, because I am not a prime minister. I'm a dictator. Pretty wild, pretty unbelievable to see. I did want to talk about, and this ties into both Trudeau and the protest. We saw, just as Trudeau's tweeting about how they're fighting against Islamophobia and all this other stuff, we can pull up the tweet, all this stuff, which is good, anti-Semitism, whatever it is, that's all great. Let's fight against that. I think we're all opposed to that pretty clearly. Racism is bad. Don't advocate for it. We just saw dozens, 57, I think, churches either scorched, vandalized, the most overt Christian persecution that we have seen very likely in the history of Canada. Honestly, basically unparalleled, other than in literal complete communist countries where the government goes around doing this. But Justin Trudeau doesn't mention Christian churches while he's overseeing the greatest persecution of Christians in Canada in a great long while, no comment about the Christian churches, the arsons. There was graffiti at churches during the Rolling Thunder, calling them fascists, saying fascism. I remember when there was graffiti at a mosque, which again, terrible. I'm very much opposed to that.
Don't do it.
Justin Trudeau visited. There was it was an incident. Every media outlet was there. Here over the weekend, Dave shared that there was cops about 400 meters away from this church that they spray painted "No Haven for Fascists," all that stuff. They weren't willing to come over and deal with it. They're just not interested. Justin Trudeau, if that was a mosque, would be visiting and saying, "Look,
he'd be there already."
Yeah,
he'd be there already.
Yeah,
he'd be there already. This is, you can draw a direct line from Steve Bell, this from Jim Watson, this from Justin Trudeau, this from the Liberals demonizing them. Somebody felt justified to go and vandalize a church, call churchgoers fascists. You know what? Was my tweet. If you're someone who thinks vandalizing a church is a good idea, you're probably the fascist you think you're fighting.
Yeah.
This is an absolute disgrace. Justin Trudeau would be having a press conference there and weeping if this were a mosque. But because this happened to Christians who are politically opposed to him, this is fine. No harm, no foul, I guess.
Yeah. You know, I don't know what to, I mean, I guess it's right there in the scripture, but it's just open season on Christians right now. You can burn down churches. Justin Trudeau will say it's understandable. You can see mass vandalisms, burnings. And the thing is the fact that there hasn't been overt criticism is sort of a tacit endorsement of this sort of thing happening. Justin Trudeau, of course, later on sort of said, well, this is bad and we shouldn't be doing this. But I mean, literally, like you said, there'd be a parade and a new campaign and new legislation passed. But literally, while this is happening, while we've seen historical churches destroyed, vandalism, dozens in my city alone, Justin Trudeau, when he's talking about religious discrimination in this country and discrimination in this country, overtly and intentionally excludes Christians. Yeah. Not to mention, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Go ahead. I was going to say, not to mention the pastor arrests, the solitary and targeted arrests and persecution of only pastors across this country, when every faith group was shunning, disregarding, scofflawing these restrictions. Literally, we only saw across Canada selective enforcement. Now, this is part of the sort of zeitgeist, the spirit of the age. Of certain groups we can't criticize, other groups we can go after. But don't tell me under anyone other than Justin Trudeau the degree of overt malice against Christians would have been so high. He has generated this climate 100%.
You know, I was driving past St. Josephat Cathedral in Edmonton the other day, and I very rarely go into the city unless it's for work or just rugby, but then it's like straight in and straight out. So when I am going downtown for work to the courthouse or whatever, if I'm driving past St. Josephat, that's the Ukrainian Catholic Church cathedral, they have this big, huge statue of Pope John Paul II right outside. Yep. And that was the statue that was vandalized. And whenever I drive past, I always just like pull the car over, run across the street, just quickly touch the statue, say a quick prayer and get going, right? And I can't do that anymore because they have security fencing around the church now. And that's because that statue was vandalized. And I would say that St. John Paul II was probably the most apologetic and most open-minded towards Indigenous peoples, not just in Canada, but around the world. And a lot of that stems, I think, from the fact that his mom was an Eastern Rite Catholic. And so he saw the importance of, you know, the church reflecting the culture of the people who were practicing it. But that the church was vandalized. And now because of that, people like me, I don't go to that specific church, but I've always taken a minute just to run past it. Can't do that anymore because of the vandalism, the spate, the plague of vandalisms happening in Christian churches all across the country. And this is what Christians have to deal with. And nobody seems to care. Justin Trudeau said he can understand why it happened.
Yeah. You know, I think what what we have to do and what needs to be done. And when you do see people coming over, it's often through personal stories. You can present the clear-cut facts that charter rights have been violated.
Yeah.
That's a very sort of abstract notion. But once you make it personal, I was having a conversation with someone, and basically the entire conversation was, you people, you're kooks, you're crazy. And then it was, well, what about people who literally can't leave or travel in their own country right now, several years later? We don't need to get into it too much. I know we're on the line, but what about those people? What about me, let's say? What about people who literally cannot fly across the country right now? What about people who can't get out back east? They have the family back east. They're in Alberta for work. There's a funeral, someone's sick. They can't fly home in the supposedly free country of Canada, where these people would say the mandates are over. What on earth are you protesting about? What about Christians who are afraid to go into places of worship? What about the Vietnamese church in Calgary that was burnt to a crisp? I mean, part of the building was destroyed. I think they managed to repair it. But these are people who escaped a regime in Vietnam that was burning down churches to come here. They weren't even here, and there was no church established in this country during the residential school programs. This is an entirely new congregation. Their church burnt, unusable. They lost their space. They left oppression. They left government overreach. They left communism behind. There you see the building. Quite a bit of work needed to be done. These people fled from that, and nobody seems to care. Furthermore, I mean, let's talk about our own Indigenous communities here. We see all of this virtue signaling and rhetoric about Justin Trudeau being the guy for Indigenous communities, and there's people in this frickin' country who still don't have clean drinking water. The kids can't have a bath more than once a week because it's acidic, and we're sitting here virtue signaling about absolutely nothing. We need to cut it with the virtue signaling. We need to cut it with the negative elements of social media and start focusing on the actual implications for people's lives. Someone should be able to fly across their own country. Someone should be able to have a bath without their skin burning. Let's deal with that stuff instead of worrying about, like Trigley-Wicken said, white males protesting and gender, whatever. I don't care. Let's focus on personal stories. Let's focus on real people. And the way we do that is by ensuring people's freedoms, ensuring people's rights. If we got the heck out of the way for Indigenous communities, they would have clean drinking water. If we didn't have active government involvement, if we didn't have Justin Trudeau controlling state media, we would have been over this other nonsense very quickly as well, because the facts would have been out there. We need to get government out of our lives, and we need to take control of them again.
You know, Trigley-Wicken's head would have just rolled right off her shoulders if someone had pointed out to her that it is not privileged white men who are disproportionately harmed by these vaccine mandates. It is Indigenous people and people of color who are the least vaccinated demographic in this country and the most resistant to forced vaccination programs. And I can see why that would be. And so when she says it's just privileged old white men who don't like these mandates, with 6 million Canadians not able to travel, what is that? 1 in 6 Canadians, 1 in 6 of your fellow Canadians are treated like terrorists, according to the airlines and the train companies, the heavily subsidized train companies. And I don't think the airlines are particularly responsible for this, but they sure haven't been saying much to defend the rights of their former customers, by the way. But 1 in 6 Canadians cannot travel inside their own country any real distance. That's not privileged white men. That vaccine mandate disproportionately hits Indigenous people and people of color. And she is cheering for it because she doesn't like, I don't know, trucks, bikes, toxic masculinity, I guess.
You know who the really privileged people are? They're the people who are taking vacation day and jet setting away from Ottawa because they don't want to face realities. The largely white, not that this matters, and I don't want to get into it, but very often privileged downtown residing liberal elite progressives who are counter protesting. Those are the privileged people, generally speaking, that they so decry and hate. You see this, you can, whether it's a March for Life event or whether it's these protests. If we're going to talk about demographics, there's no clear-cut demographic amidst the protesters. They come from an array of backgrounds. Very often you'll immediately clue in on a Polish accent, or someone says they're from Nigeria, or someone escaped Vietnam, whatever it may be. There's an extremely wide array of stories there. Not so much amidst the counter-protesters. There's a bit of a demographic congruence, if you catch my meaning.
Especially the March for Life. You and I have been to the March for Life together before we worked together. And it's overwhelmingly young and overwhelmingly minority at the March for Life. It's female. The March for Life is very female when they say, oh, it's old white men trying to control our bodies. No, the March for Life is very female, very young, very minority. And it's the privileged, liberal career student busybodies who say, oh, what about the poor women who can't afford to have these babies? As though being poor should be some kind of death sentence. They're the ones who are exhibiting their privilege to, tell these minority young people, often who are from lower socioeconomic demographics, what they should think, and the government should think what's best for them.
We've got 5 minutes left. We promised to talk about leadership. Do you have something else, or should we get into that?
Yeah, no, we've got something else. We've got Olivia's got the clip of Justin Trudeau justifying the vaccine mandates.
Oh yeah, let's do that.
The NDP Liberals won't follow the province's lead and give unvaccinated Canadians their rights back. Maybe they will follow our international partners. We know that the Prime Minister values his Playboy image on the world stage more than anything else, as his travels and selfies prove. But our international partners are bewildered as to why the Canadian government is so reluctant to let life return to normal for all Canadians. Switzerland and Greece are removing all travel-related restrictions next week, and virtually no other country requires it for domestic travel for their citizens. So why won't this government follow the science?
The Honourable Prime Minister, Secretary to the Minister of Health and the Minister of Sport.
Is he allowed to say that?
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank my honourable colleague for giving me the opportunity to highlight a recent study indicating that, unfortunately, the unvaccinated continue to disproportionately risk the safety of those vaccinated against COVID-19, and highlight the fact that in the last week, almost 12,000 Canadians have received their first dose, 30,000 Canadians have received their second, 89,000 have received their third, and over 220,000 have received their fourth dose, Madam Speaker. This pandemic is not over. We all want it to be, but we must continue to follow the science. We must continue to support our neighbours. We must continue to fight for kids to ensure that young people under 6 do not get COVID-19, as they have been the biggest numbers in the last couple of days. Thank you.
Oh, go paddle a canoe. It's
scapegoating the unvaccinated without even knowing why they're unvaccinated. He has no idea why people choose to be unvaccinated, whether they can or can't get a vaccine. He doesn't know or care, but he knows they're the bad guy.
Yeah. And no matter what facts are presented by, hey, the whole rest of the world, everyone has dropped these restrictions, but Adam Vancouver did. Knows better. I'm glad I get to hang out with Thurn Fleury Olympians and not Adam Vancouverton Olympians. Unreal. They aren't even jiving with the mainstream science anymore. It's ridiculous. Like we've said, week after week, our prophecies come true. But these people, they are that crowd that says, well, no matter what you show me, I'm not going to change my mind on this. Wild to see. Hopefully people start to wake up to this absurdity and realize what is going on. It seems that all the governments around the world are starting to, but apparently not ours. This is Justin Trudeau's favorite thing in the world. He likes having the power to exclude people. He likes having the power to not have to declare emergencies act and send armies in to enforce. This all boils down to Justin Trudeau and his megalomaniac mentality. And I love the fact that people who criticize Trump for his ego love Justin Trudeau. Like, if you're in that camp, you've completely checked out from reality altogether, because Trump was very much a humble brother Andre compared to Justin Trudeau.
Oh,
it's ridiculous, unreal.
Tell me this isn't a cult with its rituals, its chants, its code of conduct that you have to adhere to, and the Messiah that's right in the center of it all. Tell me it's not a cult. We should quickly touch on the Conservative Party leadership. Things are happening, and things are, some old problems are resurfacing, and I'll let you get to that, and then we'll get to a few chats, because we have just more than a few that just rolled in. So if you want to get to that, and then I'll queue up the chats.
So we basically, for those who don't know, April 29th was the deadline to raise it was $300,000, but now they've added taxes and there's some other fees. So I think it winds up being $365,000 that they had to pay. So a number of these candidates were pre-approved. So they'd gone through an interview with the leadership committee and they were approved. The next step for folks is to become verified. So those sort of mainstream candidates, I believe it's at 6 now, that are verified and have gone through everything. We know their names, given the timeline. I'm not going to go through all of them. But other candidates who are actually approved or in the approval process and successfully raised their funds reportedly have now not been verified, and they're having a hard time hearing back. We want to make sure we get the facts straight, because it could be the payment wasn't filed, or there was an issue, or they found some sort of problem in the fundraising practices. We don't want to report something until we have the facts lined up. But it does seem that two of the sort of fringe, but maybe more interesting people who are gaining some momentum, Joe Letienne as well as Joseph Bourgault, have not been verified. Now, I don't think there's been an official statement addressing it or saying what's happened, but we know for sure Joseph Bourgault had an event saying that they'd paid and they got all their signatures and they'd already been approved by the party. So we're very much going to reach out to the Conservative Party of Canada. We don't want this old Aaron O'Toole style top down. We don't talk to the media. We moderate the entire thing. We choose who gets to be here. There is no doubt a sort of standard procedure for approval. You can't espouse very radical views and be a leadership candidate, but most of these folks already sort of cleared that hurdle. And now for other reasons, apparently they're being excluded. So we are going to be investigating that. I think for each of the candidates excluded, we're likely going to have a journalist taking that on. I'll be looking into the Joseph Bourgault stuff. For people out there wondering what's happening, we are on it, but this is very sort of breaking stuff. The announcement's coming today, yesterday. But we will have much more on that this week.
God help these Conservatives in the party who continue to replicate the problems of old, it would seem. We don't know quite all the details yet. But, even if you allege that these candidates who are apparently, based on the information that we have right now, meeting the party's benchmarks, as tricky and as complicated as sometimes they can be, if they're meeting those and yet still you're denying them, if they are as fringe as the party wants to have you believe they are, let them run and let them lose and put that to bed. But what's the point in blocking a candidate and then it's just controversy for what? For nothing. Let them run, let them lose, if that's what you think.
Yeah. And again, in the interest of responsible journalism, it could be we found out there was questionable fundraising, or there was something here or there.
He's a murderer.
We don't know what this is.
Whatever.
Yeah. But given what we've seen, whether it be Jason Kenney being investigated for some of the leadership stuff there, or some of the legacy of the Conservative Party of Canada excluding media, unwillingness to answer questions, that largely, I have to say, we've had exclusives with most of these candidates. Those who haven't, I've spoken to most of them personally at this point now. Those who haven't been able to sit down for an exclusive, it was in the interest of time, and they've committed to speaking in the future.
Or it was Patrick Brown.
Yeah, Patrick Brown skirting it. But it seems that there is a new shift under Candice Bergen, under the Conservatives now, where they're not just running away from questions. They aren't shying away from issues. They're realizing they can't just be Justin Trudeau light. because who would want to be that? And they actually have to be accountable politicians like once existed in the Harper and pre-Harper era to some extent anyways. So that there seems to be a positive shift there, and it would be such a shame for them to ruin it by excluding someone just because they're like, oh, well, I don't necessarily, his opinions on, I don't know, whatever it may be, are a little bit off. So it remains to be seen, but we'll be covering that certainly. But yeah, lots of content this week. Keep your eyes posted. Leadershipreports.ca. We've got exclusives coming up with Roman Baber. I think we had folks at a bunch of events, at the meet and greet events. Kat and Nat were there. So yeah, we got people all over bringing you the latest. Very often other outlets aren't there. So make sure you're checking in at leadershipreports.ca regularly. Yeah, we had Kat and Nat out there. You were at one, Andrew was at one. So that, again, that's all leadershipreports.ca. And if people want to see our coverage of the convoy, including this most recent one, the Rolling Thunder bikers in Ottawa, they can see that all at convoyreports.ca. And you can support our coverage there because we did deploy 3 teams, 4 if you count Efron working by himself, all the way to Ottawa. Oh, and then some. So I guess we actually had 4 teams of the broader Rebel team working on the streets of Ottawa to bring you the other side of the story. So that's at convoyreports.ca. Okay, and another way to support the work that we do is by sending us a paid chat. Let's read some of those now. We've got, I know those are rare moments of like TV talking head from me. Annalisa, 1964. She's a David Menzies super fan. He's in the bloodstream with Annalisa, like an AstraZeneca clot. Okay, I probably just got us kicked off of YouTube. Anyways, although that's a problem that Health Canada said arose, so I'm not just making things up. Okay, so that's $20 from Annalisa. Finally, a quiet day at work. I've missed all of you. I just wanted to say all the shows last week rocked. And please tell Sweet Menzies it's okay to be cheap. I like a frugal man, LOL. He wants money back for lost lottery tickets. So if he plays somebody else's numbers and they win, he gets to like keep the bulk of the earnings and then divvy it up. But if the numbers lose, he wants a full compensation from the person whose numbers he played. What kind of madman is he? It's like you can't even make him understand why he's wrong. No comment. Look, I have a very cheap husband too, so I really feel for Lady Menzies on this because we call my husband Rusty, not only because he has red hair, but because his wallet like literally squeaks when you open it. It's like rusted shut. So I get what Lady Menzies has to deal with there. You should give that wallet to the Trudeau government. They could use a little squeaking when their wallet opens. Wonder where those billions are going. It's unbearably cheap, but it's good because, you know, when we work in a boom and bust industry, it's good to have somebody who worries about things like that. So Fraser McBurney gives us $5. My report from my protest on Sunday. He's in Hamilton. Standing alone in the rain, I held up my sign supporting the truckers and bikers in Ottawa. Only 2 passing cars honked their horns. That's what you get in a commie city like Hamilton. Or maybe there's a ban on honking there. You don't know. Yeah. They were honking in their hearts, Fraser. Honking in their hearts. Maybe they're scared. I think Edmonton still has its ban on honking. I'll have to look into that. Calgary doesn't because of our successful filing, which we'll have more on this week. Protestlawsuit.com. Protestlawsuit.com. Rebel gets results. So the next one is from my friend Mike from Freedom Honey. He's a veteran. He works to protect children from alleged sexual offenders who recidivist bail, who like offend while they're on bail. He and his lovely fiance work very hard on that sort of stuff, and he's a veteran, so he's done his time serving the country too. So Mike, who we have a problem with super use, so we can't even see how much Mike gave us, but thank you, buddy. He says the government is now pushing for farmers to get off ammonia fertilizer for an all-natural solution. Are you folks ready for food shortages and for extra expensive food? Because there's a reason organic groceries are so much more expensive than normal groceries. And it's because they use different kind of fertilizer and different kinds of pesticide. Not to say that they don't use pesticides or fertilizer. That's a common myth. They use different kinds, which are, you know, less effective.
as a farmer who firmly believes in crop science, they are less effective. And so the yields are less, and that helps make those groceries cost a lot more. And so you want farmers to get off ammonia fertilizer, well, then get ready, because your grocery bill is going to go through the roof. And I saw some liberal musing the other day about, oh, yeah, this is a great way to have farmers make a transition. Do you think we like paying extra for inputs? We're price takers, not price makers. So if we could save on the input side, we make more money when we're selling into a market on a price that we don't get to set, that we have to take. So this idea that farmers are just like, oh, yeah, like running around just sprinkling ammonia fertilizer in the air because we just like to waste money, that's insane. But yeah, if the Liberals want us to get off ammonia fertilizer, I'm sorry, grocery buyers, you're in for a wild ride.
Well, and this is the government get out. Like, sure, yeah, have some regulation, minimal, whatever, make sure society's functioning. But there's options for people out there who want all organic, and there's benefits for that, sure. It's there. There's people who do that because there's a demand for it, but it's not everybody. And some people need affordable food because they can't necessarily afford that because our taxes are too high. Because you're making us transit. We can't afford the organic food because you're making us transition through ridiculous policies like this away from ammonia fertilizer. Anyways, vicious cycle, never ending.
I know.
Yeah.
Well, and a lot of like the ammonia used in fertilizer it's waste product from other practices. And so what are we going to do with that now? Like, what are you going to do with that now? You're just going to, I don't know. I don't know.
The Chinese will use it as fertilizer.
Yeah, the Chinese will use it as fertilizer, or we'll send it to the United States. And then sell us cheaper fruits. Yeah, we'll send it to the United States so they can use it on their produce, and then we can truck it back up to Canada.
For the environment.
Wonderful. And then they're like, look, I saved the environment with my avocado toast. Not realizing where avocados come from or how they're grown. Let's keep going. We've got shall not means shall not, gives us $7. Trudeau has to go. LCM, leaderless Christian militia. Just be careful there, friend. January 777, $5. Check out Lieutenant Stephen Rogers online, Twitter, and other platforms. Interesting stuff if you're a freedom fighter. Joyful from the heart gives us $1. Sheila and Adam, a week before Easter, Food Basic had 2 flyers, one for Ramadan and one with the general with the word Easter embedded on the price labels. Last week, they only had 1 flyer celebrating Eid. Why? Well, because Easter's over. Eid lasts longer. I guess I probably wouldn't read too much sinister into that. I mean, it's shameless marketing, right? Yeah. Although, like, I would like it if they actually did Easter things that reflected the full Easter season, but that's just me.
All the shelves just barren of meat during lunch.
Yeah, get the meat off the shelves, please. Just my glass of water meme, follow me for more Lent recipes. $5 from Fraser. I hope you can read this on YouTube. Canadian patriots wake up. The police forces across Canada are not on your side. Note that they wear black uniforms. They use bully tactics on peaceful Canadians. They side with the radical left. Will you ever vote Liberal or NDP again? I'm not sure a lot of Liberal voters watch us anyway. I mean, they hate watch us, and that's fine. Probably doing research. Like, I forget, is it Media Matters? That they have a team of people who literally just watch what Sean Hannity and Tucker Carlson say every single day.
Probably.
I bet there's people out there like that for us.
Oh, for sure. There's people, like, literally there's concerted efforts on certain tweets. The same people respond to all tweets. It'll be 6 of the same message from different people to a tweet that's saying the same thing with the grammar slightly changed. There's 100% teams that watch. And we also know, hi to everyone in office, that Justin Trudeau, Jason Kenney, all you guys have people watching. So, hey, everyone, how's it going?
I know you do.
Yep.
$5 from Fraser. He asked, is it radical to want Roxham Road closed? Is it radical to want those illegal immigrants to be sent back to the USA or their own country? I don't even want them sent back. Like, I want them to try coming in the front door. That's all I want. Like, I don't think that's crazy. just do it the right way. We have pretty luxurious treatment of actual refugees in this country, and I'm not opposed to that. I'm pro actual refugee. I just don't like people coming in the back door.
Well, speaking of the back door, we're seeing Justin Trudeau setting the example. He sneaks away from journalists and enters events through back doors all the time, definitely setting the precedent. But the thing for progressives out there, for the 8 of you who are watching, when someone comes into the country illegally, what you very often see is the services start becoming consumed. So people who have been waiting years or are going through the process and are doing everything legally, they actually get bumped because they're addressing these illegal immigrants who are coming into the country. So people who are following the rules, doing everything right, want to come in, they actually get bumped down because other people are crossing the border illegally. I think the mentality that closing Roxham Road is radical is sad. It's the rational and self-evident thing that any sane Canadian would want and should want. So we're not likely to see it under the Justin Trudeau government.
Well, and Justin Trudeau is particularly ridiculous on this issue because he quit prioritizing victims of religious persecution in the immigration queue as one of his first acts of business when he took control. What that did was it bumped Christians who had survived a genocide in the Nineveh Plain and Coptic Christians who at the time were being burned alive in their churches by the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt. It basically made their journey to Canada impossible. Thankfully, many countries in Eastern Europe stepped up to resettle many of them, and the churches there, as well as Australia, actually became one of those places where Christian survivors of genocide could go. But it's Justin Trudeau believed in, he called it a fair and equitable immigration queue then, when everybody had to stand and wait in the same lineup. Sometimes Christians waiting with their persecutors in the same lineup, as you'll see in the refugee camps on the Nineveh Plain. However, he's perfectly fine with leaving Roxham Road wide open for people to dump the immigration queue.
Yeah.
Anyway. Pamela for freedom. By the way, that was my Tucker Carlson moment. I was kind of on the fence about refugee resettlement, but when I went to the Nineveh Plain, it sort of hardened me in one direction, that I am very pro-refugee, but real refugees, not the kind that wander in the back door ahead of the ones who need to be here.
The people at Trigglywickin called straight white single males, I don't know how that matters, but I guarantee a bunch of them escaped hellholes in order to seek freedom, and that's why they're out protesting. So yeah, people who lived under those regimes, they're going to be they're massive contributors to society, obviously, but they're also pro-freedom because that's why they came here.
Yeah. And the last one, we're 17 minutes over now. Pamela for freedom gives us $20. Love you guys. Even with tough topics, I have tears in my eyes. You still make me laugh, Sheila. As someone who's done a 180 from an NDP voter, wow, to a conservative-minded person, thank you. Wow. Good for us. You know what? We saved somebody, Adam. Good for us, right? Out here proselytizing the good word of conservatism. And that's the thing. When somebody says, you know what, maybe I am anti-mandate, even though they bought in at the beginning, they were scared, they listened to the TV. Mm-hmm. You can't hold that against them when they come around. No, that's what we're doing here.
Table, as Matt Brevner says.
Yeah, that's what we're doing here. That's what we talk about this stuff. Hopefully we can change a few minds. And so when you come, get on over here. I'd leave that all in the past. Get over here. You've come around to our way of thinking, which is why we talk about these things, which is why that New York Times article was so ridiculous about Tucker Carlson, because they talk about what he was like when he was younger and how he changed till now. And it's like, well, I kind of hope that he grew and, changed his mind about certain things, or
I know they've appropriated the term, but it's called progress.
Yeah.
Not your version, but adult growth and development, and yeah.
What do they call that? Evolving? My opinion's evolved. Yeah. Well, when it happens, great. Get on over here, big guy. You're one of us. Or Pamela, big lady. You're not a big lady. I'm sorry. You're probably very small. anyways, that's the show for today. We're 18 minutes over. I'm starting to lose control of my mind. We should wrap up the show. Thank you to everybody in studio in Toronto who put the show together and makes it happen. Thank you to our web team who make sure that there are links and things that you can click so that you can watch us. That's actually quite a big job that they do every day. Thank you to everybody who tuned in. Thank you to everybody who pitched in to keep the lights on here at Rebel News. We know there are lots of places that you could support with your hard-earned dollar, and we appreciate that you chose us. Adam, thanks for being my co-pilot, you and Jesus today. And as David Menzies always says, stay sane.
In Canada, everyone should feel safe and supported, no matter where you come from, what language you speak, the color of your skin, or the way you pray. So, to help educate all Canadians on what it means to be a Muslim in Canada and support the Muslim community, we're going to be supporting you to tell your own stories in your own words. We're supporting the Muslims in Canada Archive to help preserve and provide access to records about Muslim people and organizations in Canada. And we're proposing to launch a new fund to break down barriers for journalists and creators from racialized and religious minority backgrounds so they can share their experiences and perspectives.